Good evening. Welcome to the April 19th City Council meeting. We're calling this meeting to order. If you'll please stand and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Jackie, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Hewlin.
Here.
Parker.
Present.
Kling.
Here.
Schroeder.
Present.
Southall. Here. Marchand.
Present.
Mayor Pepper.
Present. Thank you. First item on our agenda is open forum, public comment. This is for any item not on the agenda that someone would like to talk about. If there's somebody that would like to talk about something that's not on the agenda, please step forward. And we'll ask you to fill out a public comment form. If you're here to talk about Streetscape, we will talk about that later. That's on the agenda.
Good evening, Brad Ross, 812 NS Court. This information is dating back to 2016, and if you'd like to, you're welcome and you're invited to fact check. Any organization and individual toss a word around transparent. This evening, we're going to walk the talk. In attendance is former Mayor Shaw, council members Clark, Pepper, Parker, Southall, Gazelle, Ross, and City Manager Waller. Later this evening, rumor is that you're going to entertain the idea of using local option sales tax and service tax loss for revenue to help fund the Streetscape project. This would be a gross overreach of the funds in the original intent. The initial local option sales tax campaign was transparent to the voters. The funds were earmarked for the new wastewater treatment plant. These are media reports. February 15th of 2016 is reported in the business record. Indianola and Warren County stated that 100% of its lost funds would go to the wastewater treatment plant. February 27th, 2016, KCCI in a report with staff, 100% of the lost revenue to wastewater treatment. March 1st, 2016, City of Indianola press release. Lost to cover most of the cost of the new wastewater treatment plant construction. May 20th, 2016, Record Herald. Lost to pay for wastewater treatment. February 5th, 2020, Business Record. Wastewater treatment plant contract awarded. 100% of the lost funds to wastewater treatment. Do not be hoodwinked. The Streetscape project is not street maintenance, but new design and construction. If you ignore the original objective of lost, you will be defrauding the taxpayers. Tonight, I want to empower you to not go behind the curtain and pull the strings of lost to fund a project that was never intended for. Have the courage to seek a different route. I'll share with the council, I'll not read all, and the mayor. This was a letter to the citizens of Indianola after lost passed for the wastewater treatment. One sentence reads, the result of the vote represents a tremendous amount of trust and confidence you have placed with us as we work to represent you and better position our community. Second sentence, funding from this tax will not be used in courthouse renovation, road repair, or any other project that does not further the construction of a new wastewater treatment plant. As your elected representatives, we want to make that commitment very clear. I'll share with the council. This was a letter that the council signed, and that was signed by Kelly Shaw, John Parker, Brad Ross, Shirley Clark, Pam Pepper, Joe Gazelle, and Greta Southall. I do have a copy to share with each of you, and if any media would like a copy, I'll be glad to make that available. And those in the audience, maybe they could talk to Jackie or someone, and they might have a copy for you.
You can give them to Jackie and she'll pass them to all of us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any media in the audience that wants one? Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else like to chat about something not on the agenda? Okay, we're moving forward. Tonight's consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay.
Brian, do you want to hit some highlights, review a couple highlights under the consent for everybody?
Sure. Just a couple of them, standard stuff, liquor licenses for a couple businesses in town. The Yarman Park, that's part of the Ford renovation resolution accepting and approving a second lease supplement to the master lease. This is for US Cellular. This is something that's been talked about previously at City Council. This is US Cellular is working on their network. And then one of the things that normally is just the city has jurisdictional, so we have our corporate limits, and then 2 miles outside that boundary, the city has the ability to approve or deny plats of survey, even though it's in the county. It's technically within the city's planning boundaries. So that is also on here. And then with Deer Creek, just we're accepting the public improvements that were made. So, nothing out of the ordinary.
Any questions? Jackie, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Schroeder,
Aye.
Southall,
Aye.
Marchant,
Aye.
Hewlin. Aye. Parker,
Aye.
Kling.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is City Treasurer's Report. Doug Scholl.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. The report that's in front of you is for the month of March 2021, so we're caught up now. We're up to date. I've reported, seems like the last few meetings, nothing really has changed. We've seen some nice growth in our fund balances, especially the general fund balance. And it's amazing with that local option sales tax, what it's meant to the city. It's up a couple $1 million over last year. The other thing that's happened is we've had these funds that kind of got mingled with the IMU and the city. And at the last meeting, at the end of February, that was about a little more than $1.5 million. We're now down to about $9,000. So they're getting that all straightened out. And as I've reported before, the interest rates that we're earning on our investments are way down from last year. Really, that, Mayor, Council, that would be my report for this evening.
Questions for Doug?
No, just more of a comment. I appreciate that you mentioned that the lost funding is higher than expected, significantly. So that's good to know.
I'd like to accept the treasurer's reports. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Oh, sorry, John. Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Doug. All right. On to council reports. First one is Greater Des Moines Convention and Visitors Bureau report. That's Councilmember John Parker.
We actually have our meeting actually be on Wednesday night now, but I did send out the update from last month, last week on the email. When next week or next meeting, I'll go ahead and have the report from my meeting from Wednesday.
Okay. Any questions for Doug? I'm sorry, Doug.
John.
Thank you, John. All right, moving on to Metro Advisory Report, Councilmember Bob Kling.
Yes, last Tuesday we met, and out of all the discussions we had, the two most important ones, excuse me, was the legislative update and the economic development district designation. Counties in central Iowa, including Boone, Dallas, Story, Jasper, Polk, Marion, and Warren, are the only counties in Iowa that are not included in an economic development district. By not having this designation, we're not eligible for EDA funding during major disasters. Central Iowa missed out on $470,000 in no match funding from the CARES Act. So the counties in central Iowa, they have a process in which they intend to follow, and they've started to do that. so they could designate these counties as an economic development district. So it's a long process, and they're working on that. The legislative update. The Metro Advisory points out bills that could affect cities, and there are 32 bills that we discussed that were brought to our attention, but I only want to briefly mention just 6, the most important ones. The first one would be the governor's omnibus housing bill. This would increase the workforce housing credit from 25 to 50 million for each. Oh, and excuse me. The first list are bills that are generally favorable to schools, and that's the governor's omnibus bill. Would increase the workforce housing credit from 25 to 50 million for each of the next 3 years, and would increase funding for local housing trust funds by removing the current 3 million cap on the 30% of funds collected in the real estate transfer tax that will go to the state housing trust fund. I trust that that is favorable. So the other one was the governor's broadband bill would allow for borrowing of 450 million over the next 3 years to invest in broadband. Now, these are bills that are generally unfavorable. Senate File 252, House File 720. This bill would prohibit local governments from adopting regulations that would prohibit a landlord from denying a renter based strictly on the renter holding a Section 8 housing voucher. In other words, that would allow a renter to not accept that, and that's not really favorable. And a new bill would start a phase out of existing urban renewal TIF that have no sunset date, with the phase out occurring over 10 years. A new slum and blight TIF districts would be eliminated to 20 years. It's in subcommittee, no further action is taken, but it's in House Ways and Means, so it's not subject to the final, which was back in March. And then there are these 2 bills that can be either positive or negative for cities. The governor's omnibus public safety bill includes a provision that would prohibit local governments who reduce funding on police officers from receiving state law enforcement grant fundings. So we're not sure the details on that, but it was a bill that was put forth to make sure cities didn't decrease funding for police. And the last one, and I bring this up because this is something that we'll discuss briefly later, or in one of the things we're going to discuss. This bill would establish a statewide regulatory structure for electric bicycles and would limit the ability of local governments to regulate these devices. This bill was approved by the House Committee. No action was taken on their version. And that's basically the legislative update of the things that could affect cities. So.
Great. Thank you. Questions for Bob? All right. Thank you, Bob. Next up is Mayor's Report. Nice to see so many people in attendance tonight. Thank you for joining us. This is Volunteer Appreciation Week, so I'd like to say thank you to the numerous volunteers we have that help the city and all of our commissions and committees. Greatly appreciate the work you do for us month in and month out. Also a reminder that if you go to our website, you can always see the volunteer opportunities. I encourage you to please apply for some of those, for some great commissions, great way to get involved with your city. So please take a look at that. Also, just a little reminder, Parks and Rec is having a flowers sales and pool passes are available. Thought we'd mention both those on a snowy April day. We met with IMU this past week. They're hoping to do a strategic plan this summer. I think that'll be great. Good to see what they'll be working on here in the future. I'm also going to be meeting with the sustainability group here in the near future. And happy Earth Day on Thursday. Always good to celebrate Mother Earth. That's all I have for you right now, but we can move into a proclamation for Arbor Day. So I will read that quickly to you. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And Whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees are a source of joy and spiritual renewal, and whereas Indianola has been recognized as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation and desires to continue its tree planting ways. Now, therefore, I, Pam Pepper, Mayor of the City of Indianola, do hereby proclaim April 30, 2021 as Arbor Day in the City of Indianola. And I urge all citizens to support efforts to care for our trees and woodlands and to support our city's community forestry program. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the hearts and promote the well-being of present and future generations. Dated this 19th day of April 2021. Thank you. I did my part this weekend. We planted 3 new ones. So I encourage you to do that as well. All right, on to old business. First item is a resolution authorizing a release for an insurance claim from property damages at the intersection of 2nd Avenue and Jefferson Way.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay.
Mayor,
Charlie?
Nope, I'm not.
I'll handle this. AP's remote right now to make room. So this is, as you recall, there was that fatal accident at the intersection of 65, 69 where it took out the controller. We did submit that to insurance. Unfortunately, as part of the accident, there was a deceased. So the insurance company went through subrogation with the estate. The prorated refund is only the $5,280.94. Our insurance broker is recommending that you recommend you pass the resolution authorizing release of the insurance claim, and then the rest is insurance in the city.
Okay, thank you. Questions by council? Okay, Jackie, can you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Schroeder,
Aye.
Southall,
Aye.
Marchant,
Aye.
Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Link.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is resolution approving a professional service agreement with K3 Recycling to provide 2021 appliance and electronics drop-off services.
Motion to approve.
Second.
This is an item that was previously shared with the council. This is tied to our hazardous waste collection. This is actually just this is just approving the contract with the vendor that's doing this. You can see the dates on there. The vendor that is selected does this same service for Carlisle and West Des Moines.
Questions? Jackie, please.
Councilmember Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Link,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Southall, Marchant.
Aye.
Motion carries. And then second consideration of an ordinance amending the city code of the city of Indianola, Iowa, converting certain streets from one-way to two-way, making necessary safety changes to accommodate the change. Move to approve.
Second.
Questions? Jackie?
Councilmember Marchant,
Aye.
Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Link,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Southall.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is a public hearing on the plans, specification, form of contract, and estimate of the cost for City Square reconstruction, most commonly known as Streetscape project. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
Move
to open the public hearing.
Second.
Okay. Jackie?
Councilmember Marchant,
Aye.
Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Link,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Southall.
Aye. Motion carries. Charlie?
Good evening. Charlie DeSalle, Community and Economic Development Director. Just quickly going to go over the history of this project, just some high-level points on it. Obviously, then open the public hearing. We can take any questions if there are any. So first of all, looking over some of the history on this project and more particularly focusing on the OPC. What is OPC? OPC is opinion of probable cost. OPC is estimate. So when we're looking at these costs that are listed on the screen, here. Usually that's based on current market trends on pricing, which fluctuates. And we're in a point in time right now, currently with the economy, these prices are constantly fluctuating with projects, and we're trying to adjust as we move along. So as with every project, the further we get into design, the more things we see. You can see on there, looking at August 19th, 2019, when we approved the streetscape plan, originally that was $4.7 million. That took into account just 4 sides of the square. As we moved along, got more grant funding, looked at some of the utility problems that we had with this project, those prices slowly went up. Council will recall $4.7 million worth of bonding was taken out for this project. As you see, those costs goes up. When we were estimating everything, when you offset the grant funding that we had, when you offset the utility costs that we have, we were always pretty close to that 4.7 million. So then, as you're aware, last Wednesday we had a bid letting. That bid letting I've got on the screen here showed as a $9.3 million estimate that we got in. That's actually $300,000 cheaper than what's in your packet because we did find one error in the cost estimates today, actually, in talking with Absolute Concrete. So we're gonna reference a lot of costs in here that are gonna look about $300,000 cheaper than what was in your memo. So looking at the total cost, when we look at everything as far as the engineers, or excuse me, the contractor's bid that we got, we also have engineering costs, we have street lights as well that are built into that. The total cost is about 10.2 million. So when we break down that 10.2 million, what's included in that? About 21% of that cost is utilities. We have a lot of old utilities in the square, some of them 80 to 120 years old. We've had problems with those utilities. We've had utilities that are undersized in the square. A lot of them are failing, some of them have failed. So those utility costs, again, 21% on there. When we look at the streets and alleys, if you're going to replace the utilities, you've got to take the streets out, you've got to replace them. It's an additional 21% worth of cost of that total. The sidewalks in the square, we have a lot of substandard sidewalks on the square that do need to be replaced. It's about 8% of the total project. The SRF funding, when looking at that, council recall we did get about $1.7 million in SRF funding that we've applied to this. That's for things like permeable pavers, rain gardens, bioswales, stuff like that. If we're not putting in those permeable pavers, your concrete costs, the streets and alleys would actually go up in cost. So we're getting that money through the SRF grant process to put those things in. That's keeping the street costs down just a little bit. And then mobilization and phasing, what is that? That's really quickly just what it costs the contractor to come down here and mobilize. One of the reasons that cost is up there, we're doing a lot of phasing with this project to help the business owners out, to help the county out. So that's one reason why that cost is up there.
No.
Engineering costs as well. So overall, what we're looking at, if we just look at the utilities and infrastructure in this project, it accounts for 81.6% of the total project. The remaining 18.4% are the finishes. And if you look here back on the screen from the previous slide, the finishes include all of these things. I'll go into them here in a little bit more in depth, but again, 81.6% of this project is utilities and infrastructure cost. The remaining 18.4% are the beautification items that are going on with the streetscape portion of this project. So when we look at those finishes, as we've called them, the $1.8 million worth of cost. Some of the high level ones that we're looking at when you do that, we're adding in trees to the square. I think everybody's aware of that with the courthouse project, there was trees taken out of the square. One of the main goals of this project was to put them back in. We're looking at street lights, replacing a lot of the street lights in there. Currently, especially on the fingers of the square, as I've commonly referred to them, so not on the 4 sides of the square, but the roads that go off the edge of the square. We have a lot of old street lights in those, inefficient street lights, not using LED bulbs. So one of the proposals that we have was to do the more efficient street lights. Over the life of that, that's going to save the city some money. And just so we're all aware, I know council's aware of this, but the city pays for the street lights, not IMU. Those are actually a city cost. And then we're adding event power in. That's so we can have events on the square. Bike night, if we ever have that back here, again, something that they can plug into, use those events. Then some of the other low cost items, some of those actually even under 1% of the total cost of these finishes. One thing I'll point out on this, yard hydrants. One of the reasons we're doing these yard hydrants in there is because with the planters and the plantings that we're putting in, want to add those back in. Right now, the Parks Department, they actually have a truck that they fill up with water, go out on site, water the plants. If it empties out, they have to go back, fill back up. we had these yard hydrants out there, it's actually a little bit more easier for them to maintain what we have out there. So looking at the total cost, and again, that 10.2 million does deduct that 300,000 that I mentioned earlier. We've got a $4.7 million bond council approved with this last budget. I mentioned we have $1.7 million worth of SRF funding available. Right now we're applying about 1.5 million of that. We've got a water utility that will pay about $793,000 worth of total cost. Sanitary sewer utility, about 707. That will be coming out of the lost funding. So there's a total of $7.7 million for this project that we've accounted for. That leaves about $2.5 million worth of cost left over based off the bid that we got back last Wednesday. So I'm going to hand this presentation quickly off to Chad Kalsdorf with Bolton and Mink. He's going to kind of go through some of the reasons that we had a higher bid, some of the reasons we only have one bid, just so council's aware of all of that. I don't know if you need that at all, but.
Good evening. So after every bid we go through a pretty in-depth analysis to make sure we know what's going on and try to track the market. So I spoke not only to the apparent low bidder, and then also those whom we spoke with, what was going on in the market at the time. We really kind of wanted to tie this down. When we had spoke to them before the bid date, we had talked to probably about 6 different contractors who said they would look at it and more likely submit a bid. Apparently the one bid was a bit of a shock to us as well. So these are the things based on kind of our post shooting match reviews of what's happening. So one of the big things was it's a complex project scope. It's in the middle of downtown. There's a lot of eyes on it. It's not easy. As one of the contractors I spoke with, there's a lot of what they call gravy paving out there right now, going through farm fields, development work, very wide open construction that doesn't take a lot of thought. They go from point A to point B through the farmer's field. There's not an issue there. So there's a lot of that on the market currently. The materials and the finishes are definitely finer than your standard construction. If this was a residential subdivision, which is the rotary construction, that would of course make it a lot easier on the contractor as well. And then some of the bid items, as we spoke through them, they weren't really familiar with some of them. These were pipe guys bidding it. Some of the specialty markets were pretty full for the year. And so they just did not bid, or they weren't as responsive as they needed to be to make the bid window. It goes to the next point where the market's extremely full right now. And with some of the stimulus money coming out, the market's going to be very full for the near future. Whenever the market's full, prices go up. Contractors don't really need the work. They're not going to be very hungry. They're not going to take on challenging projects if they have, again, the gravy construction projects. I think some of the contractors would have liked to put in a bid, but they're again, being quality contractors, their schedule was full. They didn't want to feel pressured, and they didn't want to do a bad job. I know how important this is to the city of Indianola, and so they decided it was in their best interest and the city's best interest not to propose. And then I think the last thing that we heard from multiple contractors is working downtown is an intense activity. There's a lot of eyes on it. There's a lot of interaction with the public, positive and negative, that they'll have to deal with, that their crews will have to be addressed, whether it's in person or other methods that they don't want to deal with. And that's, we've had this in other cities that will remain nameless, that wherever there is intense social scrutiny on whatever they do, prices go up. And the other thing is, being in downtown, there's a lot of things that are unknown. We feel like we've isolated everything that we can, but once you start opening up and again working in 100-year-old infrastructure, there's some things that can happen. And so they were a little concerned about that kind of liability as well. So based on all these things is kind of what we felt like the market was. I will say that Absolute, who did Absolute Concrete, who submitted their bid, said they like challenging projects, and they were hopeful that the project would go forward. But at the same time, this is the kind of project they like. They like the challenge, and they're on board. So they're very positive towards the project and all the challenges therein. So.
Thank you, Chad. So as we outlined in your memo, as we see it from staff standpoint, there are 4 options we have moving forward with the bid that we received. The first option is to rebid the project at a later date, thus rejecting the bid that we have in front of you this evening. Some pros to that: you may get bids that come in lower and you may get more bidders. However, at the same exact time, and as Chad mentioned, we have a lot of stimulus money coming down through the federal government right now with all the COVID relief stuff that is coming in. Most likely, those costs are not going to necessarily go down because of what market's doing right now, what we're seeing. So it's kind of a gamble a little bit, but both options are something that could take place. I mentioned some of that relief funding that's coming down. We've briefed council on this one a couple times, but there is an American Rescue Plan that is sitting out there. By all indications that the city of Indianola has been given, we should be getting about $2.2 million of funding from that. I think it was a couple council meetings ago that we briefed council on that, and we discussed some possible projects on that. Big cons to those are right now we have absolutely no guidance on what's going to be required from that funding. So there might be additional things that need to be placed onto this project to make it work with that funding. At the same time, we've kind of gotten some preliminary feedback from council on some of the roads that we should be working on those. And if we apply all of this funding into Streetscape, then those projects need to be paid for in some other way. Looking at local option sales tax funding, that is an option that we identified as well too. We wanted to point out through this, first of all, that I know there was a commitment that was made in 2016. We've got that listed on the screen here above, that was going to be used for the wastewater treatment plant. I know Michael Maloney is on here as well too, our financial advisor. He's gonna give a presentation here after I'm done, but just some high level stuff. And what he's going to say is that that fund is outperforming any projection that the city made back in 2016 on it. And we'll give you some more details on that here in his presentation. Some of the pros on this, excuse me, it does comply with the authorization through the ballot measure that was taking place. There'll be no impacts to property tax rates and no impacts to utility rates by using this funding. And I said the cons, like I mentioned, again, there was a commitment that was made to use 100% of these funds on the wastewater treatment plant. The last option that we have is to borrow more and issue additional bond issuance. This does allow for other sources to be used on other construction projects, and it's less restrictive in terms of management. However, by doing this, you're possibly increasing the debt levy, which thus would increase property taxes. So with that, few items that you have in front of you this evening, first of all, is the resolution approving the plan specifications, form of contract, and estimated costs for the reconstruction project. The plan specifications and form and contract were not in your packet because it would have probably quadrupled, maybe even more, the size of your packet, but those have been in file in the Community Development Department office and the City Clerk's office through the duration of the bidding window. Looking at the OPC, I've listed the OPCs up there that was included on our previous screen, but that's broken down with a Division 1 cost of about $6.8 million. That covers just the majority of the Streetscape stuff. Division 2 cost of $28,000. That was the cost associated with the conversion down by the post office, adding the mailboxes and the traffic signal. And then the alternate A, which was north of Ashland on Buxton and Howard, that one block of about $600,000. And then after that, obviously council will be asked to consider a resolution awarding a contract. We recommend that you review the options that I presented in the previous screen. And then we would also further recommend not pursuing the bid alternate at this time. So if there's any particular questions of me, I'd be happy to answer them. I don't know if you want to take them at the end or what, but.
We'll start now. Council, questions?
I kind of like to see the next part.
Okay.
I'd like to see the.
Okay, that's fine. We can move on. We can still ask questions. Okay, go ahead, Charlie.
Sorry, messed up it.
No worries.
Okay, I see Michael Maloney's setting his stuff up here. I know I have an unstable internet connection on Wi-Fi here, so it's going to be on the TV screen there. Okay.
Charlie, is that coming through okay?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, folks. I'll follow up on what Charlie and Chad had provided here with just some brief overview on some of the financial considerations. I think the best place to start with is just talking about the WRF financing plan. Just going back to the early stages of that multi-year planning, you may recall that the previous target for sales tax revenues were approximately $800,000. Now, over time, the revenues that have actually been received have steadily increased, and something that the city's done through various scenarios of updating based on that new information have increased the annual target to $900,000 and then eventually $1 million per year to provide to the actual financing. The increase of that from 800,000 to $1 million is a 25% increase in the sales tax contribution to the WRF financing plan. I want to be clear that that's the annual level of effort towards the debt repayment to help reduce the amount of debt burden and rate impact for sewer users. We obviously have gone through that process significantly, completing with the process on not just the bids, but the financing early last calendar year. So this is just reviewing that information. You may recall that in addition to using the sales tax funds to apply for ongoing debt repayment, the city also made a point to set aside lost revenues to help reduce the amount of financing. So the target for that was about $6.3 million from initial collection through the end of the actual project. Overall, that goal was about 42% for the WRF project to be paid for from the lost revenues. I want to put that in a context. The concept here, as you recall, was to focus on how sales taxes could really reduce the burden to ratepayers within the community. And that's a model and a template that other communities are trying to follow. That 42% number is really aggressive. Working on a couple right now where our hope is that the community can use sales taxes for 15% of the project. So that's really, really favorable in terms of what was achieved last year as this was executed. Just a simple graphical version of this information in terms of those financing sources. And again, this is the same chart that's been provided to council in the past, was just on the WRF financing sources, what dollars are coming from where. And this is again showing the work between the gray and purple shading to represent 42% of the total project coming from those sales tax revenues. Obviously more dollars being applied after the receipts were stronger than our initial planning for when we finalized the process after bids were received early last year. So what does this mean in terms of shifting gears? Well, to be clear, the sales tax revenues have continued to trend favorably. And this has not just been a city factor, this has been across the state. So, the cities continue to be conservative in those revenue projections. I think Andy and staff would be clear that the sales taxes can have some volatility as they're outside of the control and are potentially more volatile. So we try to stay conservative with those. That being said, when revenues were better than anticipated, the city did apply more. Again, that 25% increase towards future debt repayment as discussed. This has continued favorably around the state as a trend, despite last year's kind of COVID considerations with the economy. So while the projections there are still conservative, hopefully they'll continue to come in strong for the city as well. So with these increased revenues from sales taxes beyond our projection, right now, the city's conservatively projecting about $3.4 million of kind of net surplus lost revenues by the end of fiscal 23. So over the next couple fiscal years. To be clear, those are surplus dollars net of related expenses for the WRF project and some additional sanitary sewer infrastructure projects. So those dollars really are a true surplus beyond the projections that were there for the overall WRF financing plan. Because of that and the eligibility to use those dollars for other public works needs, the city can consider applying those lost revenues to address other projects that are eligible within the city. So, I think that's a consideration that should be focused on is that these are not, new dollars or new sources. You've got excess dollars above and beyond some of the conservative budgeting practices that were used to implement the overall financing plan for the WRF facility. As you can see from the 4 considerations Charlie noted there, one of the main benefits of these revenues is it doesn't have an impact on either user rates or property taxes. So neutral from an overall standpoint in that regard. Just a graphically overview here before a couple final points. I wanted to just chart here, and there's a lot going on this chart, but I want to walk through it with you. The purple lines, hopefully pop there for you to see, represent really the budgeted amounts expected in certain years for sales tax revenues, while the yellow shading then is representative of what was actually received. So that gap between the yellow and the purple then is really the additional sales tax revenues collected. The red shading is the targeted debt service that was expected to be repaid from sales tax revenues. So, we planned on those dollars. We need to make sure sales taxes were sufficient to make those payments. And as you can see from 17 to 20, those projections are representing that increase of 25% from about $800,000 a year to $1 million a year. The last piece of information here is just the gray net surplus line. Just over time, how are those sales tax revenues and the balance trending versus our projections? And as you can see, we're just shy of 3.5 million, the 3.4 referenced on the previous slide, by the end of fiscal 23. So those are above and beyond the sanitary sewer and WRF financing plan needs that have been highlighted, along with the additional sanitary sewer expenses. That's a fair amount of information. I think a couple items I just really want to highlight here. I mentioned, this is something that other communities are trying to model, being able to use sales tax for some of their larger treatment plant needs. The level that the city's put forward it's just a really big dollar amount. I think 42% of the project being paid for this way is really excellent. That's just not feasible in a lot of communities and has really helped buffer any rate impact. I think the last piece I would note is I have been participating in similar conversations around the state with some bids coming in above expected. I know Chad mentioned this a little bit in his portion, but I do want to reiterate that there's been impacts related to just the general economy and the supply chain. Some of that's related to the pandemic, and we've definitely seen projects with some volatility in those construction bids, depending on the type of materials, mobilization, et cetera. So 20 to 30% overages on estimates have not been rare. We're dealing with those. Communities are dealing with those impacts. Not everyone's got some of the options that the city has at this time. So just a little context from around the state that I thought might be useful for the council as they evaluate these considerations. I'll pause there and first start with Charlie if there was anything that I'd left out, and obviously any questions from the council, I'm happy to answer.
Charlie, you're good? Okay. Council, questions?
So Mike, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So we've got 3.4 million, and if we were to use the 2.5 million that we needed, we'd still have a 900,000, almost $1 million excess. Is that correct?
Yeah, and to be clear, that's an overtime element, right? So I'm projecting that through fiscal 23. So that's over the next couple fiscal years. You're sitting with a strong balance right now. We're netting out all the costs that we're planning to apply to the WRF project. So everything that I'm talking about with those surplus items are above and beyond what we're planning to expend. But that's correct as you project out over the next 2 fiscal years.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Charlie, do you have more to present? No. Council, questions? I have a couple. I can start.
Mayor,
Yeah.
do you want the public hearing is open?
Yep.
You want to take the public hearing first?
Oh, the vote?
Yep.
I'm sorry. We can do that. I'm sorry. Jackie?
No,
We did that.
Wait,
No,
wait till
you're still in public hearing. So procedurally, the public comments and those that wish to speak during the public hearing, the council.
before our questions?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, so we are going to move to public questions. I have received some documents here, so I can start with that, but I want to begin with, just again, some overall ground rules. We're asking everybody that wants to speak 3 to 5 minutes, please address all council. This is not a dialogue. Please state your name and your address as you begin. And then please, if you haven't filled out a public comment form, please make sure you fill those out. If you're in the overflow room, someone there will make sure you get into this room and have a chance to speak. So don't panic. We'll double check before we move on to other things. So then I'll move into the ones that I have forms for, starting with. First one is Michelle Steen.
Hello, I'm Michelle Steen. My address is 610 East Scenic Valley Avenue here in Indianola. These are just some suggestions if we're over budget on the streetscape, to consider pausing to change the streets to two-way. That'll save on the changing of the signs. I was going around the square today on the way to the post office and someone almost hit me head on because they were going the wrong way. And I was in Winterset Saturday. It's a two-way square and it was very confusing. I just think while all of this stuff is going on, just consider pausing it. Consider taking out the towers and arches that will welcome everyone to the square. I think those aren't really necessary while you're trying to, lower costs. Consider not widening the sidewalks in front of the buildings. I know they'll be torn up due to underground projects, but to keep the angle parking on both sides of the street, pause the parking lots, don't take away so many of the parking spaces with parallel parking. I know when I take my mom places, she's not going to have ability to, go from a parking lot to a restaurant very easily. So just consider pausing that. Because I know that since it's been voted on, you do have to probably move forward with it, but just to hold off. I would suggest letting the county plant the trees and bushes for now. Eliminate the city's landscaping of the trees. What the city adds to the landscape can be done in the future. Be sure to not cut corners on cement. I've seen firsthand where cheaper cement is not a good thing. It can expand in the winter, causing some doors not to open. I mean, there's just a lot of problems with cut corners on that. But as a former business owner on the square, the upgrades underground are very necessary. And they're going to be out of sight from people. No one will be able to see. It's not going to look beautiful, because no one will see it, but it's very necessary. So just, I guess my suggestion is just put a pause on some of the unnecessary things at this time.
Thank you, Michelle. I have Brad Ross's form, but that's for your earlier comment, correct? Okay, just wanted to double check. Brian Enzrel, I apologize if I say your names wrong.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. It's Brian Endrezal, 1000 North 9th Street here in Indianola. Good evening once again. I would urge the council to consider rejecting the bid and considering all the things that are involved with the previous speaker as well as our first speaker, as far as we're talking about almost a double in which the amount of monies that were going to be allocated. And I understand that bidding in such a way that there's many contractors and many potential wares that they could actually work in other locations. But I think we've got the benefit of time here, and to give kind of a bit of a pause here and let the courthouse be built, give a chance to see kind of how the traffic is going on right now would not be an issue. I would also encouraged to let the county pick up whatever they can as far as the beautification efforts. I've yet to see, living here in Warren County, a project that came in at the budget it was supposed to. I mean, when you look at the courthouse and other things throughout Warren County, Indianola, we're already now at double what it was before. And so who's to say that we're not going to need additional funding? One of the previous speakers also mentioned about that 2.5 million future grant. Let's get that money in here and see what we can do for that. But also, as far as the lost money and the increased revenue, and it doesn't go without saying to all of us here is, that's our money. Yes, it's yours to utilize on our behalf though too, but if there are excesses in funding for different things, perhaps the council could look at ways to potentially give that money back to the citizens of Indianola as far as rebates, grants, or lower other things. I mean, just because we have the money, we can use it for certain things. At the end of the day, it's the taxpayers' money, and if we can find ways to give it back, that to me should be at least considered. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next up, Brenda Easter.
Hello, good evening. Brenda Easter with the Indianola Chamber of Commerce, 111 North Buxton. I'm here to read a letter from the Indianola Chamber of Commerce, and which is also signed on by several businesses. The Indianola Chamber of Commerce has supported the City of Indianola Streetscape project from the very beginning. This project not only addresses critical issues today, but positions Indianola for growth in the future. The Chamber continues to support this project for the reasons stated below. The number one reason why the Streetscape project is critical to this community is to repair the aging infrastructure, which today now poses a safety risk for residents and businesses. The city has identified that the water lines around the square are undersized and in bad shape. These poor conditions impair the city's ability to adequately fight fires. Now that they know the problem, they cannot ignore it. Recently, a downtown business could not install a needed sprinkler system to protect their investment because the current infrastructure could not support it. Business owners have invested in their buildings and deserve the peace of mind that their investments will be protected to the best extent possible. The downtown square has some of the oldest infrastructure in the city. Just as residents would expect to be able to live in their homes with an adequate supply of running water to launder their clothes, flush their toilets, and do other normal household chores, so do businesses. Today, our businesses on the square regularly experience difficulties with running water and sewer smells just to run their normal business activities. Updating outdated infrastructure is an economic driver for future growth. Indianola won't progressively grow if we don't continue to invest in our future today. Developers, businesses, and industries expect a community's infrastructure to accommodate their ever-changing, ever-demanding needs. The community has indicated in several surveys that the downtown square is important to them, a place they like to gather. This is the first real investment in the downtown square in several decades. We can't ignore the fact that for the downtown square to be a safe flavor. Beautification of the square is a byproduct of the project that will stimulate the economy and make the Indianola downtown a vibrant place for people to gather. This project is not about the direction of traffic or parking. It's about the future of our community. To abandon the project is a statement to our businesses that our community is not willing to invest so that they can be successful. We need thriving businesses as they are an integral part in the fabric of our community. We strongly encourage the city to reassess the project, determine how to move forward without raising property taxes. Now, I'd like to mention that this was signed by many businesses within our community, including community leaders and building owners. And if you mind, I'd just read a few if I have just a moment. Kevin Halterman, People's Bank. Joan Amanda Ripperberger from Brickhouse Tavern and Sports Page. Marcia Kelleher, Simpson College. Kathy Magruder, Page Turners. Keith Welling, True Bank. Barb McMurray, Iowa Realty. Aaron Freeberg, Adorn and Feed and Foster. Brad Rudolph, Rudolph Insurance. Misty Soldwich, BHGRE Innovations. Pamela Bruce, Pamela's Place. Cami Haynes, Lula Bell. Rachel Gookin, Warren County Economic Development. Terry Pauling, Exit Realty North Star. Pratish Patel, Hotel Pommier. Eric and Leslie Held, Bob's Custom Trophies. Doug and Heather Gomer, West Hill Brewing. Ardeen Downing, Carrie Bishop, Iowa Realty. Jennifer Maloney, McCoy True Value. Seth Lampman, Clear Path Financial. Justin Brown, Downing Construction, and the list continues. I want to thank you, and I appreciate all your efforts in making the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Thanks, Brenda. Next up is Brian Fox.
Good evening, Council. My name is Brian Fox. I live on 1014 North 9th Street. First, I'd like to thank each one of you for the hard work that you put into this community. I know without this hard work, nothing is possible in a fine community such as the one that we live in. I'm here to speak on my own personal opinions and observations concerning the Streetscape project. I completely understand it's not logistically possible to make a estimation of what a project will cost. I know it's more of a guesstimate than at best. From my observations, there are two goals for the project. First, it's to correct the water and power infrastructure underneath the square. Second, it's to help increase commerce in turn, and in turn help boost the economy of Indianola. I agree that having an aesthetically pleasing business center within the town has the potential to bring more people to the area. However, I would argue that the cost of the project as a whole, that it needs to be split into multiple smaller projects and spread out over the course of several years. The other options that have been presented since the bid was much higher than projected to me are a waste of taxpayer money and the Indianola visitors' money. Taking the funds from the local option sales tax when they were promised to be used 100% for the wastewater treatment plant is a slippery slope to be on. With all this in mind, I strongly suggest that the Streetscape project be shelved for now and replaced with a project to update existing infrastructure, not only at the square, but around the community as a whole. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Next is Kelly Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor Pepper. Council, thanks for having me here. Appreciate it. It's really fair to say that I spent a lot of time looking at the Streetscape effort, not only as mayor, but also as a private citizen now. And I think it's really been interesting to watch, certainly. As with all policy decisions, I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned here. And here's a short summary of them. From the type of stakeholders invited to participate in the decision-making process, to the public meeting that lacked structure and brewed frustration among constituents, to a finalized plan which eliminated some on-street parking around the square and altered traffic flow, to the reliance on another governmental entity in the form of the Warren County Board of Supervisors to accommodate your plans and your aggressive schedule, and also your sidewalks. To the expectation that the Indianola Municipal Utilities, or IMU, would forego their capital improvement plans over the next 3 years in order to accommodate your plans and your schedule. And finally, the extremely narrow bid window coming at the end of a bidding season, which no doubt led to the higher bids that the engineers' estimates had projected. I sincerely hope that the council and staff learn from this experience and that future projects are better thought out and executed with the cost of taxpayers in mind. I mention these lessons both as a private citizen and as a former mayor because I really care about this town. I care about the investments, which Ms. Easter talked about downtown. I care about the time, their talents, and certainly the money that it takes to invest in this community. I've said this frequently, both in the public sector and the private sector, and I applaud Brenda Easter and those who have invested downtown. I would, however, be remiss if I didn't bring up two important points. And these are the important points that I want to say. First, as a former council colleague, Brad Ross just said a few moments ago, all of us who encourage voters to vote for the local option sales and services tax need to reserve these funds for usage in the building of the wastewater treatment plant. Campaign materials, articles, public meetings, public pronouncements all said that 100% of the local option sales and services tax monies would go to the new plant north of town. In a letter dated about a year ago right now, April 2020, where you questioned my veto of your budget, each of you on council, the 6 of you, noted your, quote, commitment to serving the community and, quote, your sacred commitment to constituents. You need to keep your word on this commitment. 3 of you in front of me, and I guess Councilman Parker's not here, but Councilperson Southall, and at that time Councilperson Pepper, signed a letter in 2016 saying that 100% of lost monies would go to the wastewater treatment plant. As my colleague Brad Ross said tonight, you should exercise your sacred commitment to keep your word regarding lost funds. In the few moments that preceded me, we heard dialogue regarding the balance fund and the lost. We also heard that 42% of our local option sales tax is going, or 42% of our wastewater treatment plant was going to be paid for by local option sales tax. This is a basement number. This is not a slush fund. You could take 100% of local option sales tax and put it towards this wastewater treatment plant. It's my belief, and I was mayor at the time, when the process for bidding on the wastewater treatment plant went through, it initially, as I recall, working with Mr. Waller, was a $25 million project. That project's north of $50 million. And so I believe it's a bit of smoke and mirrors to say that 42% is a great number, where that number could be much higher than that. My second and final point, mercifully to all y'all, is to note that there are certainly more than 4 options or 4 paths that this council could consider, given the cost of the one bid that was received. In your packet, there are 4 policy opinions, and well, I guess it wasn't Mr. Lent, but where'd you go? Oh, there you are. Went over those different options. One of the options that I think could be considered is establishing a self-supported municipal improvement district, or SSMID. This is something that has been used successfully in Des Moines, in Iowa City, in Cedar Falls, and in Spencer to revitalize those downtowns. And if shop owners around the square are so fond of the streetscape, as Ms. Easter just said, then getting them to approve a SSMID should not be a problem. As an added bonus, the SSMID will generate money for the square well beyond the current streetscape development that's under consideration. If an SSMID is not considered, there are other options. I hope at the very least that this council will look into utilizing TIF funds or tax increment finance funds to make up the gap in financing. The state of Iowa gave local authorities the opportunity to establish TIF zones for each economic development goals. And it is clear that the streetscape has been marketed, as we just heard from Ms. Easter, by the city of Indianola and the Indianola Chamber of Commerce to drive economic development around the square. I thank you for your time, thank you for your service, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Next up is Joe Gazelle.
Mayor, we just like to comment read.
Okay, thank you. Joe's comment says you are backloading the funding to the wastewater plant, which is stealing $3 million to the wastewater. If you have to spend money, you need to buy some land for economic growth and development that brings revenue in. Okay. Doug Gomer. And Steve Armstrong, you're next. I think you're in the other room as well.
Hello, Council. Doug Gomer, West Hill Brewing Company. Address is 219 West Salem. We've been used as an example. Probably what started most of this was infrastructure for us. We had a business idea, brought it to the city. It was great, started moving forward. And a big hangup was water pipes. If you know anything about brewing, water is pretty much what it is. It takes 9 gallons of water for every 1 gallon of beer. So water is important. That's just brewing. That's not the safety of our patrons either, which is where fire came in. And so we almost couldn't open our business in town where we wanted on the square. And so that was a huge problem for us. Looking at the Streetscape project, obviously, anytime that you revitalize an area, it's if you build it, they will come. East Village in Des Moines, Valley Junction, any of these communities that invest in their downtown square, their businesses do better. Their town center does better. We're a little bit off of the square, so directly in front of our building, a lot of the issues that have arisen from other business owners, like parking and stuff, doesn't really apply to us because they're not really changing a whole lot. So for our immediate area in front of our building, there's not going to be much change. I think it's parallel parking. It's going to go back to parallel parking. We're just going to have the added benefit of water and safety. I think overall it's a good project. I think it was thought out. It's not my job to figure out where the money is coming from. That's your guys' job. That's your guys' promises you've made to other people. So I'm not really going to have an opinion on that. But my biggest opinion is, safety obviously is number one for me. Having enough water to grow our business and continue our business is probably number 2. And then number 3, having an attractive area where people want to stay here. They don't want to go to Des Moines for a Friday night or a Saturday. They want to stay, go get a drink at our place, go get some food at another place, maybe vice versa, come back, maybe go shop, hit up a couple stores, like make it a night, make it a day. But obviously it's ugly right now because everything's torn up. But if it's pretty and it's attractive, you want to stay there longer. So my opinion is, for the most part, in favor. Obviously, there's some things you guys are going to have to tweak and figure out and cut and add and whatever. But yeah, West Hill is in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Armstrong.
Steve Armstrong, 607 South End Street. Just wanted to say, Kelly Shocker hit it on the head really well with all the points. So I'll just try to keep it short. Don't want to exceed that 20-minute time limit. But you have options. You can wait, rebid it. That's the best option out there right now. That time window was short, but there is good news, right? Excess lost funds, pay off that
wastewater treatment plant a little bit sooner, right? Another project over bid. Yeah, it'd be great for the citizens not to have to worry about the funding for that. So with that being said, I think we should wait, get new bids, bid it when that time is appropriate. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Jackie, do you have any other public comments?
I do not, and we have not received any phone calls.
Okay, we received some earlier today, so I will read those. First one's from Kirk Meintz, 405 West Ashland. I would strongly encourage the council to delay the streetscape project and let the project for new bids at a later date. Costs for construction are currently out of control for various reasons due to the pandemic. As I understand it, other options are to borrow more money, which is just a financially poor choice, or use money from the local option sales tax. I would hope you will have the integrity to honor the past city council's commitment to use that money only for the water treatment plant. If you do otherwise, getting people to vote for future bond issues will be next to impossible. And finally, to use the hoped for 2.2 million is, as my grandma told me, counting your chickens before they're hatched. And if my math is correct, that still doesn't get us to the total of the one bid submitted. I know it would be convenient to get the project done, although the county wouldn't mind if it were delayed. But please do the financially prudent thing, and we can put up with a mess for a little while longer. Thank you for your consideration. The next one is from Pritesh Patel, 1215 North Jefferson Way. I strongly support plans to rejuvenate the downtown square. We have an opportunity to kill multiple birds with one stone, resulting in infrastructure improvements, public safety enhancements, and a destination that can drive economic activity for the entire community. With that said, I am confused and hesitant moving forward with a single bid that is significantly over previous estimates. Every responsible homeowner and business owner knows to get multiple estimates before moving forward. Excuse me. Do we fully understand why other contractors didn't have interest in this project? Bolton and Menk should shine transparency into the process and explain why plans were developed that only a single company in the entire world responded to. We have companies in our own backyard that have the capability to do the work. Why did they pass? Blindly awarding to the highest bidder will not build confidence unless additional justification is provided. Next one's from Ardeen County, 8489 Highway 6569. As a property owner on the south side of the square, I wish to show my support for the streetscape project. It will help to enhance the square as a destination and bring more economic growth to Indianola. The timing is ideal, with more people choosing to shop locally and to shop in smaller businesses. Thank you to the city staff and council for looking to our future. Ardeen Downey. The next one's from Cammie Haynes. As a newcomer to the Indianola Town Square, I am excited about the positive changes. My husband and I purchased a building on the square because we wanted to invest in Indianola, and having lived here most of our life, we know the importance of supporting our community. It is something we have considered for a while, but wanted to wait for the right building and timing. We decided that now is the time with the new courthouse and the streetscape plans. Is the construction inconvenient and messy? Of course it is. But in the end, I truly think our community will shine and become a destination. I have been building my customer base outside of Indianola. I noticed more and more people are coming to spend money from Polk, Dallas, and Madison counties. They are choosing to come to Indianola due to the new addition of great shops and restaurants. I am all about positivity and being a team player. Let's all support each other and help make Indianola the best it can be. Thank you, Cammie Haynes. And then I have one from Amanda Rippiger. To whom it may concern, I am writing this letter as a business owner and property owner on the Indianola Square, a member of the steering committee for the Indianola Streetscape project and the chair of the Indianola Chamber. I have been working on the Streetscape steering committee for the past 2.5 years. This is not something I would have typically felt inclined to serve on, but the project really caught my attention. I have owned my business on the square for almost 10 years and have worked on the square at various businesses since I was 14 years old. It was always my dream to work and live in Indianola, particularly on the square. Working on this project has opened my eyes to so much more than just giving my input on a beautification project. I firmly believe the project has been misnamed from the beginning. This is much more than making the downtown area more visually appealing. We are addressing infrastructure issues that are long overdue. The Brick House building has not always been a restaurant. It started out as a hardware store long before my time. The Brick House has grown into a thriving restaurant, and we are so grateful for that. If anyone has ever visited our restaurant on a busy night, you will notice that the toilets will not flush in a timely manner. This is something that has been an issue for years. We have tried several different options to fix this, but the truth is that our water source is just not enough. To make these repairs, major construction is going to be needed in the downtown area. As a business owner, we are hopeful that the construction timeline is not pushed out any further than needed. We are happy to see the progress around us, and to see it all wrap up at once would be ideal. It is my belief that the benefit of this project far outweighs the negatives. We hope with additional bids, slight changes to the plan to decrease the project and proper funding, the Streetscape project can continue as planned. Thank you, Amanda Rippiger. And now I believe we have a couple more forms. Stephanie Erickson.
Good evening, Stephanie Erickson, 1102 East Kentucky Avenue. Sorry, got a couple different points here. I won't take too long either, because I think a lot of things have been said. I want to publicly say that when I ran for mayor, I actually was opposed to the Streetscape. It's not that I'm opposed to helping our businesses out and helping it grow. I actually think that this is a great opportunity. I just have concerns with the payment for it. So I'm going to go over a highlight of our wastewater treatment plan. In 2016, the cost was 25 million. In 2019, that skyrocketed up 5 million. In 2020, this is straight from a letter that the city sent out on January 21st, 2020. The city of Indianola opened bids last week on a proposed new wastewater treatment plant. Sorry. With the lowest bid coming in at 45.6 million. That's $7.2 million, 18.75% higher than our pre-bid estimated cost of 38.4 million. That goes on to say a couple other things that are important. One of those is a quote from our city manager that says, "Our primary focus is the best interest of our residents and our community, not the quickest solution." So I'm going to ask you to follow with that too. This is not something we have to do now. Second, so this hasn't really been addressed. I should have brought my water, sorry. We're talking a lot about safety. With Buxton and Howard going two-way, I have concerns for the Simpson Campus College. There are eight Simpson properties that are on the other side of Buxton and Howard. Now, I wasn't here back when C Street was shut down and it was sold to Simpson, but I understand that was pretty contentious debate that happened here. I did go to Simpson. I think it's great that you close down a street. When I was in Simpson, somebody drove their car and sideswiped every single car on C Street. So closing that seems great, and we closed it for safety. Then why would we take Buxton and Howard and make them two-way with 8? And out of those 8 properties that Simpson owns, that is the Copy Center, Pi Phi, Worthington Apartments, Colonial Apartments, the Art Studio, Campus Services, Square Station Apartments, and the Gomer Center. All of those students will have to cross now 2 streets to get to where their classes are. So if we're going to talk about safety, I would like to see what your plan is in regards to crosswalks. Hopefully some lighting that these students can walk and be safe. Otherwise, we will have a problem and somebody will be hit. And that'll be absolutely devastating. We need to make sure that we are looking at this in the best way, though it's been passed. And I would encourage you for your next project to look at Iowa Avenue and East 9th or in North 9th Street, particularly in the morning. And I am sure that your police officers can contest to that when they do the crossing guard. We have a major issue there, and that should be a concern you should be looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Monica Thompson.
My name is Monica Thompson, 303 West Salem. Thank you for allowing me time to speak. My concern chiefly is with the timeline for the sidewalk and street maintenance on the square. I am a very close neighbor of the square and spend time every day on the square and in the streets around it walking. And I see these sidewalks firsthand. As a member of the Hometown Pride Committee, we spent some time over the weekend on Saturday going and doing City Square cleanup, which was a very intense, down to the ground level pickup of cigarette butts and garbage and things all around the city square. And the two things that I've seen the most that concern me most greatly is as the sidewalk approaches from the street to the sidewalks and in the crosswalk areas, as well as just on the lengths of the sidewalk, both immediately around the square and off the perimeters, there are a lot of areas that need repair. My mother is in a wheelchair, and I know from growing up with her, irregularities in pavement can be really difficult for those with mobility needs to sort of navigate. And I feel very strongly that the sidewalk maintenance and repair needs to be addressed separately and more immediately than the streetscape overarching plan. The sidewalk repair and maintenance cannot wait for a streetscape plan to move forward. It can't wait for bids. It can't wait for the time to be right. It can't wait for this big project to come to full fruition with all of its wonderful bells and whistles. And I can tell you, I'm excited. We're very close neighbors to the square. So as a homeowner in the area, I am invested in the square being as vibrant and wonderful and usable and beautiful as it can be. But at what cost to the city overall and in what method of planning, that I'm deeply concerned about. I think the current plan should be paused until funding and timing can be improved, and that the sidewalk maintenance and repair needs to be addressed completely separately and taken care of in a more urgent fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Seeing none, do we want to close the public hearing and then answer council questions
Then council discussion.
and council discussion? Okay. Anybody
Motion to
else?
close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay. Jackie?
Councilmember Hewlin. Aye. Parker.
Aye.
Kling.
Aye.
Schroeder. Aye. Southall. Aye. Martin.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you for all those that came and chatted with us tonight. We appreciate it. So then let's move into resolution approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the city square reconstruction known as Streetscape project.
Motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Comments, questions now?
Discussion.
I have something. I'd like to have our city attorney Doug Fulton clarify the comments from Mr. Ross and from Mr. Shaw about the turnaround and the fraudulent practice.
Yeah, under Iowa law, one council can't bind another council by virtue of a public declaration. Even though that council and mayor exhibited their desires, that's not binding on subsequent councils, because every council is an independent body and makes its own decisions based upon its own facts. So obviously it's something that's there. It was a proclamation, but is it binding on this council? No, it's not binding on them. The only thing that this council has to continue to look at is the actual resolution that went into that was approved prior to the local option sales tax vote, and that is to use the lost monies on construction or rehabilitation of public safety facilities, public works, and street maintenance. That's kind of your guiding what you have to do and what that prior council did commit you to that. So
That's all that loss can be used for again.
that is correct.
Say those three things again, please.
Public safety facilities, public works, and street maintenance. And then 0% property tax relief. So that was you have to designate those things. So that was the proclamation going into that lost election. So that's what you're bound by, but the declaration, you can take that to whatever you want, but it's not binding on this council.
So to clarify, in lay terms, is not fraudulent.
That's correct.
Thank you. And despite the fact that we are taking in far more than anticipated, there is no way it can be used to offer property tax relief.
That's correct. That is not allowable.
Questions? I have one. I'll throw it to the city staff. This project is or is not affecting my taxes? This total cost?
And I'm gonna lean a little bit here as well on Andy Lent too, because I think he can help out. So there was a $4.7 million bond that was pulled for this that is being paid out of by TIP. It's my understanding though, and Andy, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's my understanding that the TIP bond that we did, the bond that we took out through TIP did not increase the debt levy on that. So, I mean, I think technically TIP is being paid for by property tax dollars within whatever district that is, which includes a few areas in the city, but not the whole city, mostly just business areas and stuff like that is where we have our current TIP district. So it would be those property owners that would be technically paying for it. But again, the debt levy did not increase with the bond that we took out.
So there was a comment earlier about can't you use TIP funds? We are using
Yes,
TIP funds.
yes, 100%.
Okay.
Well, not 100% of the cost, but we, yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I thought someone suggested that we should just take care of the infrastructure and then do work on the streets later. Is that possible?
It's possible, yes. Based on how you do it, you're probably increasing overall project costs depending on how you do it. So
Because where's the infrastructure?
yeah,
Yeah, in the streets.
Yeah.
Comment on that?
Mhm.
I think we saw that like 81.6% of the total budget is infrastructure, which would be replacing pipes, putting concrete back over the top. So if my math serves me correct, that's about $8.3 million. So if we do the things that we should do, because people have kicked the can down the road a bazillion times in this town. So if we don't do the infrastructure, we'd just be kicking the can down the road again. Is that correct?
I think it's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, if we're $8.3 million into infrastructure, we're about $2.5 million shy according to the numbers. It doesn't seem like it's smart not to do the project if we're that close anyway with what we really have to do. I mean, that's kind of more of a statement than a question, but as I see it, this chance of delaying seems to be one that puts us in further jeopardy from a cost standpoint. It also, potentially delays what we've committed to business people. And I think part of what has been said for a long time about the helping the downtown businesses isn't only cosmetic. It was, as we've heard, infrastructure problems, lack of water, bad sewer. So at the end of the day, I think kind of what I'm seeing from the numbers that Mike shared with us, and the fact that we can use the money for public safety facilities, public works, street maintenance, things like that. It just seems like when we're able to meet, we're still able to meet 100% of the commitments towards the WRRF, or what's formerly called the wastewater treatment plant. It seems like we're on target for doing those things. That, if I'm looking at wanting to do the project, and I do the one option of waiting for money from the American Recovery Plan, we don't know for sure what that's gonna be or what we can use it for, so we kind of got to throw that one out. So I'm kind of down to either voting to raise taxes and sewer rates, or taking money out of the loss fund and finishing the project, which I call it option C. It's the third one listed. And that's the one to me that has the least impact on the residents. And we obviously can't give money back. I think that was somebody's question about, what can you use the money for? So I'm just kind of looking at this thing from a standpoint of, we just can't keep kicking these projects down the road. And I'm glad, would I have liked to have had a lower bid? Sure, but I'm glad we got a bid. And I think it's a workable number that we can, move forward. So I'm pleased with everything that's been presented. I appreciate the audience with questions and inputs for and against. So thanks everybody for your time.
If I could, Greg, we talked about, you talked about 81% going towards the actual infrastructure, and everything above that would be the amenities. Well, we know that we can't wait on this infrastructure. We know that can't happen. And listen to the businesses. We know that what draws visitors to a town are the amenities. They aren't going to come down and look at our new sewers or flush our toilets. That's going to happen. But if you want to draw visitors to the town, that's why you have to have those amenities. That's what communities desire. You can talk to any successful business district in this state, and it's those amenities that draw them in. And trying to fix one thing without fixing another at the same time, this is an opportunity. Well, first of all, it has to be done, but it's an opportunity to be able to make the entire project cost less, because if you wait and try and add on, everything's just going to get more expensive. And with the money that's going to come out, possibly with infrastructure and the recovery money that communities are talking about getting, bids are not going to get lower, and it's going to be, I think, even more difficult. So,
well, and drawing visitors is one thing, but safety for all the people that are here is probably my number one thought process. And the second part is something we hope to accomplish, but let's make it safer and more usable for the current residents.
I wanted to ask Charlie to talk about that a little bit, because I know you've given us some research that you've done with from Transportation Research Board, Journal on Planning Education Research, Public Health, Bloomberg, and multiple case studies. And do you have those points with you, or
You're talking the one-way to two-way conversion
yes,
stuff?
the one way to
I can pull up the presentation
safety.
if you want.
Yeah, addressing safety. I just would like to, because
You're
that
just going to
was
have to
brought
give
up.
me a second to get everything fired up here. So if you have any other questions besides that, go ahead.
No, I don't.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. Hopefully I'm not stepping over somebody here, but I totally agree with Greg. I've been in the industry of bidding projects. While not a general contractor, I do bid with a lot of them, and I heard a number of times tonight and had heard from other people that tight bid windows. This was a normal bid window. I mean, it was normal. There was nothing tight about it. It was an odd bid. I mean, it's a complicated one. There's a lot of things going on there. I do know pricing from what I'm hearing from other people in other parts of projects. Piping and a lot of this infrastructure cost, concrete is going up really fast and high. I think it would not behoove us to put this off and rebid it at a later date, because the prices are just going to keep going up, and money's going to get tighter. I'm concerned that with us able to get some cheap interest rates, we're wise to be moving forward now with this. I sat in that room and I agreed that we needed to put the dollars towards the lost dollars towards the wastewater treatment facility, and we've done that. We've met those conditions, and we had no concept at that time that we were going to be seeing returns like we've had. And my opinion is, if we're able to use those and still meet that commitment, then we're nuts if we don't take those dollars and help another part of the community and help more infrastructure updates and fixtures. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that we had a person up here pointing his finger at us about holding up our commitments, and yet I'm pretty sure he quit about 2.5 years into his term. So,
John, I'd just like to jump in on that. I think that, as you pointed out, one of the things that we've kind of skirted around, Brenda addressed it in her letter, and I really appreciated all the comments, but that letter in particular really hit one of my main concerns is I don't think if we wait, we will have a square. I don't think the businesses can survive it any longer. I think they've already fought their way through at least 2, maybe 3 years already of an empty courthouse, a hole in the ground, a year of construction. If I could make the decision just based on that, I would. I'm not, but considering safety, considering the advice of our financial advisor, considering the advice of our city attorney, our staff recommendations, there are just so many reasons. But safety was brought up several times this evening, so I'd like Charlie to just review.
So, and the research that we did here was that you referenced there was on some of the one-way to two-way conversion stuff that we talked about, because obviously that was a big component to this project based off what the steering committee's direction was. But we listed on here some pros and some cons, and this was based off the research that Councilmember Schroeder referenced. But some of the pros to converting to two-way were business exposure increases, livability, property values, revenue, and taxes all increase. Bike and pedestrian safety increases. It eliminates the raceway effect, slows traffic down. Driver attention increases, and traffic safety improves even if traffic volume increases. Continuing on that, there's a reduction in total distance traveled, enhanced public safety access, easier navigation for residents and businesses. One-way streets can be confusing to visitors or infrequent users. It eliminates wrong-way drivers, and there's less signage and pavement markers. On that, we also listed some cons. It's adjustment period for drivers. Delivery vehicles, we pointed that one out in here because right now on the square, you essentially do have 2 lanes of traffic, but it's one way. So if there's a delivery truck that's there, the delivery truck can be parked in one lane, drivers can get around. If we go to 2-way traffic, it's just a little bit more complicated for that to happen. Probably one of the only negative things that we saw on this, but I think it's an adjustment that people can hopefully get used to. Number of vehicle and pedestrian conflict points does increase just because now you do have 2 cars going there. But we point that out at the same time, when traffic slows down, those potential conflicts also decrease. Through traffic is slowed down, and there is a one-time labor and capital cost. Wanted to point out one other thing too, because as we looked at this, as it applies, we did a speed study on some corridors to just kind of see how they were playing out. And just very quickly, I'll go over this, but on North Howard, for 24 hours, and North Buxton for 24 hours, and on North D Street for 24 hours, we observed traffic by a traffic counter that we have. Pretty much about 12 to 1,300 vehicles on the Howard and Buxton areas, but the top speed on Howard was 48 miles an hour. It's a 25-mile-an-hour road. Top speed on Buxton was 52 miles an hour, again, 25-mile-an-hour road. The percent of the drivers over the speed limit was 2/3 of the drivers on both streets going over 25 miles an hour. Now, we use North D because that was a street that was recently changed from a one-way street to a two-way street. I'm not exactly sure when because I wasn't here, but I think it was within the last 10 years. Number of vehicles did actually decrease on here because it's not as busy of a road, but the average speed dropped down to 23.45 miles an hour, and just 1/3 of the drivers were going over 25 miles an hour. So we pointed this out because that really did a really good job of showing two-way traffic slows vehicles down. And that's what that research that we provided before shows.
Thanks for reviewing it.
I'd like to comment if I can jump in here.
Yes.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to everybody who's come to the meeting tonight. It's really great to hear everybody's comments, everybody's concerns, their questions. I felt coming into the meeting that I was pretty confident in how I wanted to vote. And what I appreciate is some of the dialogue that came up and some of the questions only made me feel more comfortable and confident in my decision. And all I can do is make the best decision I can with the information I have at the time. And so a lot of the questions that came up, I think helped cover that. I think it's time to put an end to the neglecting the infrastructure and the safety concerns. I think that doing this project will set the course for a better future, and it's necessary. I definitely support using the lost dollars. I appreciate the comments on the questions on that, because that really solidified for me that it's in my opinion, the best decision that we can make with all things considered. So definitely, that's where I would support that. I think it's definitely the best way to go in finishing this project and getting done what we need to do.
Thank you.
Jordan?
I agree that this is a must do from a safety and infrastructure perspective. And, you know, like Heather, hearing the different sides, obviously it's helped me weigh out my decision. But it is something we have to do. And the fact of the matter is, you can't be a don't raise my taxes, don't raise my rates, and don't lose loss. You can't have both of those things. It is not something that is an option for us. And we can't cite a reason for delaying this project that the wastewater recovery or water resource recovery facility project has increased in cost over time, and then say, delay this project.
It's just going to get more.
It's not going to add up. I mean, it isn't going to get cheaper. And is there a possibility that if we had a new bid tomorrow, it might come in short or less than the other one? But the fact of the matter is, that isn't how this works. And we are not likely to get a lower bid, and we definitely cannot put off the safety and infrastructure anymore. So I guess we hear so often that people don't want an increase in taxes. They don't want an increase in user rates because that impacts everyone. Whereas local option sales tax, we have additional revenue that was never planned for. It is legal to use it for this project, and it is paid for by people that are not our citizens too. It isn't only our citizens. So that's what I stand with that.
So I just want to mention.
It's really kind of an unexpected silver lining
Right,
to
yes.
For sure.
what's come up.
I just want to mention that I do support using the lost. I was on council when whatever resolution, but it's good to know that I didn't think that resolution committed future councils. Stephanie Erickson brought out something I thought was very important when she talked about how the cost of the wastewater treatment plant kept going up until we finally get to the end. That's what's going to happen to this project if we put it off. I don't know how long we have to put things off until we finally accomplish something. Somebody at some point in time, years ago, had to build the square we have, and it's time it's got to be fixed. So I have to look at how to pay for it, and that's the only way I can come up with. We have that extra money. It doesn't raise property taxes, so I think that's the best solution.
And I feel like it feeds itself, right? You know, if taking the time and care and money to make these improvements, not only because we have to, but also because they will be more attractive, will feed into the sales tax revenue.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
And I think it's important to note that there's more than one business that has expressed concern about their survival rate if we don't do something. They cannot survive another 4 years of a hole or a mess. That just isn't logical. That you can't do it.
Other comments?
Mayor.
Yep.
This is Greg Chia, I'm the fire chief.
Yes.
I've been listening, and if you don't mind, if you would oblige letting me speak a little bit.
I was going to ask you to speak, but you beat me to it. Go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, you know, and I've been listening, and I'm going to tell you right now, my answer is going to be biased because I'm in favor of this project. The infrastructure part of this is so disastrous in the square that it not only puts the businesses at risk, but my employees. And when I say I know Ryan will get on me about that. It's the city.
No, he won't.
I don't want to see anybody get hurt because we have a lack of water. You have 4-inch mains, which are inadequate. You have 6-inch mains, which are inadequate. The minimum we should be running at is with 8-inch mains. And those mains have been in there since 1900 to 1930s. So I'm sure there's a lot of deposit in them. So they're probably about half the size or half the diameter. We've had events since I've been here, and I've only been here since 2015, where I've had to pull crews out of a house fire, a residential structure fire, because we had inadequate water supply. And we've had to actually hand lay hoses, blocks, to get the adequate water supply. So it alters our tactics to provide a service. So, and you know, you've got the funding. Take advantage of it, improve the infrastructure. Right now, you can say, yeah, we haven't had a fire or a severe fire in the square for years. Okay, we've been lucky. And I would, anybody that has a question for me on water supply, you can talk to me now or you can come talk to me later. We currently have 17 miles of 4-inch main in the city, and much more of that. And I think it's close to 30 miles of 6-inch main. That's my piece.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. Anything else, council? Jackie, call the roll.
Councilmember Hewlin.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Kling.
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye.
Southall. Aye. Marchant.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, resolution awarding a contract for the City Square reconstruction streetscape project.
Motion approved. Second.
Comments? Jackie, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Schroeder.
Aye.
Southall.
Aye.
Marchant.
Aye.
Hewlin.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Kling.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Resolution approving and accepting a temporary easement for the City Square reconstruction known as Streetscape project.
Motion to approve.
Second. Charlie?
I don't know if you need me to speak on this one. I know we've briefed council on this many times, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Can you just give a quick overview? of
Yep,
what that
so we're as the streetscape project's been going along, we've been working with the county as a partner in this project. The right-of-way lines as they currently are on the interior of the square, which is the courthouse side, do not adequately match exactly what's going on within the roads. They're old flats from 1860. So we are attempting to redraw those, relook at them, and get the improvements that we're doing as part of the streetscape project into there. So worked with the county on that. Originally, we asked for right-of-way for this because of their project actually having legal boundaries around it. They couldn't give up the right-of-way at this time. So the temporary easement that they have granted to us does state that we can start construction on there. Once their project is closed out, they will then transfer that temporary easement as right-of-way in the future.
Thank you.
So.
Questions, council? Jackie, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Hewlin.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Kling.
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye.
Southall. Aye. Marchant.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. How about a resolution suspending section 122.23.5 of the Code of Ordinances of Indianola, Iowa during the duration of City Square reconstruction, also known as Streetscape project.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Charlie?
Really quick on this one, if you're aware, we have a mobile food truck ordinance within the city that allows food trucks in the areas on the screen here shown in red. So pretty much on the 4 sides of the square, and again, as I've used commonly, the 4 are the fingers coming off the square. As there's going to be areas, part of this project that are going to be out of commission where food trucks aren't going to be parked, we did look at some alternatives on where we can include them. So we're asking council by resolution to suspend this ordinance, then adopt our temporary new regulations that will include all of the areas in red, but then also add areas that are shown in the purple there. and that we believe will adequately give every business on the square the option to have a food truck within close proximity during this construction period.
Great.
Questions, council? Jackie, please.
Councilmember Parker,
Aye.
Kling,
Aye.
Schroeder. Aye. Southall. Aye. Marchant,
Aye.
Hewlin.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to new business. First consideration of an ordinance amending the city code of the city of Indianola to increase the stormwater utility fees from $2 to $6 per equivalent residential unit.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Ryan, you gonna give us an
Mayor,
update?
yes, thank you. So as we've discussed several times regarding the city's stormwater master planning, so this was a four-year study of the storm sewer infrastructure in the city. So the storm sewer is the water, are the pipes that conveys the rainwater when it rains. And through that identified 18 priority projects. The city has, in various neighborhoods, experiences flooding. And as part of that review of the infrastructure, a lot of problems with those storm sewers. And in identifying those 18, the recommendation was to take a look at that rate that we charge. The city of Indianola is one of the lowest in the region. And by keeping that current funding, it would take 28 years, approximately 28 years to address those 18 priority projects. That's not including any sort of emergency situations. Talking about the square, we had two sinkholes, two large-sized sinkholes over the last couple of years because of stormwater infrastructure that was broken, not maintained over decades. As our engineer provided during a previous study session, increasing the rate from $2 to $6 would shorten that time frame from 28 years to 9 years. Most residential structures have a $2 bill or $2 fee on the bill that IME sends out for us. So that's $24. So this would add another $48 for the year.
Questions, council? Jackie.
Councilmember Marchant,
Aye.
Hewlin.
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Kling,
Aye.
Schroeder. Aye. Southall. Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is Friday Night Live Summer Concert Series. Approval of an event application from the Indianola Chamber of Commerce for Friday Night Live Summer Concert Series at Memorial Park on June 11th, June 25th, and July 9th, 2021, from 6 to 9:30 p.m.
Second.
Comments, questions?
It's nice to be planning concerts.
Right?
Yes, yes.
Brenda's here. If we have questions, I'm sure we'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
We know we can sing.
Jackie,
Or
please.
can't.
Councilmember Southall. Aye. Marchant,
Aye.
Hewlin.
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Kling,
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye.
Motion carries. A noise permit application from the Indianola Chamber of Commerce for the Friday Night Live Summer Concert Series at Memorial Park on June 11th, June 25th, July 9th, 2021, from 6 to 9:30.
Move to approve.
Second.
Questions?
Great to have noise.
Jackie, please.
Councilmember Marchant,
Aye.
Hewlin.
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Kling,
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye.
Southall. Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. On to other business. City Manager's Report, Ryan Waller.
Thank you, Mayor. Just included in your packet, we wanted to provide an update to you on the proposed changes to Chapter 76. If you recall, several months ago, maybe closer to a year ago now, half a year ago, we were approached by Bird Scooter. They were looking to start deploying their scooters in our town. We didn't have regulations. We talked to the chamber, we talked to Simpson College, and then came and asked the city council if this is something they wanted Planning and Zoning and Parks and Rec Commission to look at. So included in your packet is just an update on the proposed regulations on this. This has been vetted by Planning and Zoning jointly with Parks and Rec Commission. And so we just wanted to let you know where this is at. We do anticipate this coming back before City Council for formal consideration here, probably in the next couple of meetings.
And for those at home, Parks and Rec and Planning and Zoning were in favor of incorporating bicycles.
Correct.
Perfect.
Good.
Good. Thank you. We don't need a motion or anything on that. How about receive and file correspondence for April 2nd and 9, 2021, weekly updates from the city manager, Ryan Waller.
I so move.
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Always have to wait for that little online voting. And the next item on our agenda is to enter into closed session in accordance with Iowa Code Section 21.51C to discuss strategy with legal counsel in matters that are presently in litigation or where litigation is imminent and where its disclosure would likely to prejudice or disadvantage the government. I just want to state before we motion into that is the last thing on our agenda. We would then come out of closed session and adjourn the meeting, and there is no council study meeting tonight. So just make sure people know there's nothing they will miss, but I need a motion.
Motion to go into closed session.
Second.
Jackie, please.
Councilmember Hewlin,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Kling,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Southall, Martin.
Aye.
Motion carries. We're going into closed session in just a minute. Thank you all for being here tonight. We greatly appreciate it.